India can also be a productive partner for Britain, because after all, Britain has been cut loose itself from Europe. Its relationship with Europe, the US is no longer the same. So I think for Britain to rise, to stay where it is, a strong partnership with India will also help them.
So, in this week's column in Rajamandala, you've looked at what New Delhi's relationship with London, India, and Great Britain would look like with a Labour government, which seems more than likely at the moment. The results, Britain's voting in about 48 hours from when we're recording. One of the curious things that you point out in the piece, we read in our histories in this thing that how actually the Labour government was almost supportive of India's independence in those early years. And then somewhere along the way, it became that in the last decade or two, that the Conservatives have been more pro-India and Labour's sort of not been. When did that happen, and what does that mean today? What is the context today between India and India?
No, I think the expression of it we saw when the Labour government replaced the John Major's government, the Tories government in 1997. So I think what happened in the 1990s was the liberalism of the Labour, morphed into more identity politics, woke agenda, the mobilization of the minority groups. So in a way, the shift of the Labour worldview towards a more radical expression of values and how to enforce them in the rest of the world. So that's when I think the breakup between the progressive Labour was in support of India's independence, and generally Labour governments tended to support, and the Indians in Britain also tended to vote Labour. But I think that broke in the 1990s, post-Cold War, the sense that the Democrats everywhere, liberals everywhere, became radical in terms of their conceptions of the world. That's what happened to the Labour Party, and I think that was expressed in when Queen Elizabeth came to India. We talk about it in the article in 1997. Robin Cook, who was the newly minted Foreign Secretary, it was all about foreign policy values, ethical foreign policy. So the temptation to grandstand on Kashmir between India and Pakistan is partly a colonial legacy, as well as pandering to the minority groups, because they have a strong Pakistani minority, they have a strong Mirpuri minority. So it combined together of radical rhetoric combined with cultivating vote banks, which happened to be anti-India, and the result of it was a more hostile Labour. And it got a lot worse under Jeremy Corbyn, and we saw that in 2019, explicit references to Kashmir in the manifesto. So I think in this period, I think we saw the Conservatives were far more open because America had moved closer to India. So the Conservatives, the Tories, were actually willing to think of India in new terms. That's what the internal distribution of how they deal with India had changed in the last 2 decades.
So, one of the things you point out in the piece, everyone should read it. It's on the indianexpress.com, and there should be a link wherever you're watching this video in the description. Like deep state, but in that sense, of sort of a bureaucratic mindset, which, if the viewers who watch Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister will know, and we had our own version. The bureaucrat actually is the continuation of the state and policy in many ways. And on both sides, there is some kind of, whether it's a hangover from previous times or even as recently as the 90s, which is now some decades away. What are the steps to overcome that kind of entrenched for a new political executive that comes into Britain, for example? What do they need to do?
No, I think historically an important section of the British establishment was deeply hostile to India, and I think that goes back to the Second World War. India's Congress Party's reluctance to support Britain at the time when Britain was down and out. It was thrown out of Singapore, fighting a war of survival against Burma in Asia, and that's when the Congress opted out. While Indian Army was mobilized, the Congress Party did not support the war. And the only group finally that supported the Britain was the Communists of India,
because
who said fascism is a bigger danger, and that you need to support. support Britain. But I think since then, and post-independence, the Congress Party's non-alignment, the anti-Western rhetoric, all of course at the same time, while of course personally everybody had fantastic relationship with Britain, Indians love Britain, everybody goes to Oxford, Cambridge, nice place to shop. But I think at the political elite level and the Indian security establishment, because of the Pakistan factor, because of the Kashmir factor from our side, and from them because India was seen as pro-Russia, pro-Soviet Union, all this came together to create a permanent irritation between the two sides. And I think that's where I think Boris Johnson and the Tories were really good at trying to overcome this legacy and try to take a fresh look at the relationship. But I think the two factors here why we need to deal with the permanent establishment. One, I think attitudes are beginning to change because India has become important. India has become, fifth largest economy, overtaken Britain. That it's no longer an equivalent between India and Pakistan. I mean, that era is gone. Second, I think the challenge for us as we look ahead is really the size of the South Asian diaspora in Britain now is close to India alone is around 1.5, Pakistan is around 1.2. If you add the Bangladeshis and others, I mean, it will come close to 3 million South Asians in a population that's not very big. It's not the United States. It's less than around 70 million population. So I think that what's happened is that what happens in India and South Asia gets carried over there. If Kashmir is a dispute between India and Pakistan, people get mobilized the Mirpuris were mobilized for a long time. They gained access to the Labour Party. And if something happens in Punjab, you have the Sikh MPs speaking up in British Parliament. So in some ways, the interdependence between the politics of the two countries, one way it's a living bridge. There are more South Asians there, more Indians doing very well. But at the same time, diaspora is a double-edged sword. I mean that while it's a bridge, it's not a one-way bridge. It's a political interaction that can be often negative. We've seen a lot of that in the last few years. So therefore, I think this is going to be a permanent problem. This is not going to disappear. In fact, the South Asian diaspora, Indian diaspora will continue to grow. And these guys are already drawn into the local politics. They're contesting elections. They join the political parties. So they're very much part of the overall political picture. And then for cultivating votes, vote banks, you're going to take positions on India's issues, which India does not like. But so we have a reality that I think we need to recognize the reality and then work out procedures to anticipate problems, prevent anti-India activity there or things happening here. How do you enforce someone, question of law enforcement, question of terrorism, all these issues come up. This needs actually cooperation not just the political rhetoric is not going to solve it. You need the security establishment on both sides to sit down, regularly exchange information, work together so that the problems don't become political. That is the real challenge, I think, as we look ahead.
So another thing you mentioned in the piece, which is worth, I think, going into is that while we are now fifth largest, we'll soon be third largest, and that Britain is still an important middle and a rich middle power with has technology. What are the certain aspects of which you think that India has ignored or not seen the importance of London, apart from, of course, in the Indo-Pacific where we're partners now?
I think we've often allowed our anti-colonial posturing to come in the way of seeing Britain from first principles. How much power does it have? How does it matter in the world? There, I think so. The tragedy, of course, or the comedy, if you will, is the intense, intimate affection and love that exists between Indians and the British. But at the same time, you have the political level, the conflicts that have dominated. So Britain actually is still, we've just overtaken Britain, so sixth largest economy. Its universities, as we know, one of the best in the world, and they're really rich sources of research on a range of areas. That's, for example, on biology, on cybersecurity, cyber-related issues. Britain is at the top. There's a cutting edge, way above India. I mean, despite all the talk of India's IT power. So I think there is a need to, for example, it is financial cloud. London is the city of finance. We are also both members of the Commonwealth, which has more than 50 members. They're dispersed around the world. This is the old empire. from islands in South Pacific to Caribbean to Latin America. So you have actually a massive network of the old empire. I think we tended to trash these connections rather than we were running after every possible organization in the world. Or SCO, any organization we want to be members. Here's something we inherited from the empire, the Commonwealth, 50 countries. That here is something we could turn it to India's advantage. As the numbers of voting as well as the resources they bring to the bear. So I think what's happened is, we still write books thrashing the British, of course, and people still make money on anti-colonial arguments. But the fact is the depth of connection at the social level. The number of Indians who travel to the UK, number of Indian students in UK, the number of Indians professionals today working in UK, that is huge. So therefore, the direction, the intensity of those contacts is real. But I think partly it's a colonial resentment, as well as also romance that exists in such intense qualities produces a complex picture in which we tend to jump to the anti-colonial argument at the slightest irritation, and not see the actual potential how Britain can help India rise faster on the international stage. Similarly, India can also be a productive partner for Britain, because after all, Britain has been cut loose itself from Europe. Its relationship with Europe, US is no longer the same. So I think for Britain to rise, to stay where it is, a strong partnership with India will also help them. So I think if we start from first principles, shed this colonial stuff, set it aside, the baggage, and say, look, here are the things we can do together. How do we benefit? So I think that kind of a first principles, interest-based engagement, which is what I think the Tories have put us on the road. And the good news, of course, is Labour today is willing to shed a lot of its old ideological radicalism. And I think under Starmer, it looks like it's more open to a more pragmatic, interest-based engagement with India.
Right. So one last quick question. So because this, you mentioned him, that David Lammy is likely to be Foreign Secretary in a Labour government, and he's mentioned that. I mean, he made it. The Tories have made a lot of bluster about the ties with India, the Tory government, but we will give you concrete results. What would a concrete? Is it the FTA? What does a concrete result look like?
No, I think it's part of the election rhetoric, how we'll do better than, because it's also partly reaching out to the Indian voters that they want to say, look, we will deliver on those results. I mean, if FTA has been waiting, and FTA, of course, is not just the problem on the British side. India has its own problems. So trade agreements are never easy to negotiate, but they're willing to do it on a fast track. On science, technology, defense, they're willing to, what Lamy is saying is that, look, they're willing to move faster. It's for India too. I think this where India needs to move fast as well. That's where I think some of our baggage comes in the way. To be fair, I think the current government has been more open to Britain than historic governments in Delhi. So I think the question is now, how quickly can we move in now? Once the Labour takes charge, can Delhi and London sit together quickly, see where the state of relationship is? So I think there's a good moment here. Hopefully both sides won't squander that moment to move faster and forward.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone. Read the piece. It's on the IndianExpress.com, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.